Okay, welcome again to using maps in education. Real fast, I just mentioned to use the text chat box to ask your questions, but let me have everyone go ahead and just type into the text chat box where you are, what your school location is. The name, not the number, please. All right, Dennis is way too excited about being out in the valley. We're glad to have him joining us today. We've got Tring Elementary School, Forbes, Smalley, Beckley, Ute Perkins, Gene Ward, Smalley, Garrett Junior High, Hal Smith, another Smalley, good. Hyde Park Middle School, Bailey Middle School, and a couple of high schools with Mojave and Western, and Johnson Junior High School. Excellent. So we've got a good mixture of elementary and secondary folks. We're glad to have you guys all here. Okay, today's webinar is a combined, a joint effort between the Instructional Design and Professional Learning Division and Mr. Jared Bartitian from RPDP and Shadow Ridge fame. I am Mark Oakton, one of the coordinators with Instructional Design and Professional Learning. I get to work directly with the digital coaches. We have two of our coaches with us here, Mr. Carl Gustafson, and I shouldn't say two, Kathy Lefevre should be joining us any moment now, hopefully. Jared, as you can see, looking at his credentials there, as far as I know, he is the only Google for Education certified innovator in the state of Nevada. Is that right, Jared? Give me an X or a check. Okay, I got it wrong. I thought I might. You're the only Google Education certified trainer then, is that correct? Oh, I'm still wrong. Jared, why don't you introduce yourself? 'Cause I'm just messing it up.
Mark, I'm Jared Bartitian. I'm at Shadow Ridge High School as the tech director right now and work with RPDP. I'm the only certified innovator and trainer to hold both certifications in the state of Nevada currently. But there's people that have innovator status in CCSD and trainer status. But the only one that have both right now. There's, I'm sure, more up and coming here very, very soon.
All right, excellent. We are so glad to have Jared with us today to share some of his expertise. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Jared, and I don't think there's anything more you need to hear from me right now.
Mark, can I go ahead and switch us over to a screen share so that I can use the links in the presentation?
Definitely. Go ahead.
Perfect. All right. So I've gotten the shortened URL on there in case those of you in the audience that want the links to this presentation that are in there. And I know that that's not on the presentation that Mark uploaded, so I'll give you a second to go ahead and write that down. This is using maps in education. I think originally it was posted out there as Google Trex when Mark and I talked about it, and then you know, thanks to Carl, he added in some great ideas as we were starting to put this together that reminded me that there's some other tools out there aside from just Google Trex for doing this digital storytelling, and so we kind of revamped the plan here to include a couple other things in how to use maps in education. And so we've got the piece there that introduces everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start with Google Trex and let you know that Google Trex was started by Dr. Alice Christie, who is out of Arizona, a very good friend of mine. I met Dr. Christie about 5 years ago or so, and she's a Google certified innovator. And she came up with this great idea about creating curricular units and putting them on a Google map. So her lesson plan essentially was placed on a map. It gave kids some global awareness and basically tied some geography to the topics that she was talking about. That turned into some student-centered lessons where they were self-paced and students were able to go through and do some exploration dig deeper into a particular activity. And so what she's done is she's been working with teachers and students alike all across the country. Her and I's path had crossed, and I kind of fell in love with the whole idea, and so I started helping her pitch the idea of Google Trex. So what we're going to look at today, and I'm going to take you out and show you some great examples of this, are these self-paced lessons that are created predominantly for students, but for the most part, students can also create these to represent their learning. We're going to look at a variety of different subject areas and grade levels. So this will touch on just about any subject area and any grade level that you happen to teach. It uses Google Maps as a foundation, and the reason that Dr. Christie chose Google Maps is because it was web-based and was universal to any device that you happen to be using. So whether you were or even any operating system, you're a Mac user or a PC user, or you want to be on a Chromebook, it works. It incorporated a variety of Web 2.0 tools, which would include images or video or other interactive resources. And what one of the requirements is that you'll see in these Google Treks is that there's some sort of assessment component for students. So it's not just this mindless walk through a map, but there's something that assesses the students. There's Web 2.0 tools that engage the students. There's videos that educate the students on top of some exploration built into that. The great thing about the way that Google has structured Google Maps now is all of that is stored directly into your Google Drive. So as you create one of these treks, it automatically stores right back to your drive in that unlimited account that you have with your new Clark County School District GAIF account. Okay, so with that, let me show you a couple treks so you kind of know what these look like. And I picked out a couple in particular that were created by CCSD employees. And so these are colleagues of mine and teachers around Clark County School District that have taken classes from me or learned to do Google Treks, and they've put together some treks that they utilized in their class. So out of the many that you'll see today on the Google Treks site when we get there, these are some that are made by our own CCSD people. So just to give you an idea, we'll go ahead and take a look at Titanic, which is a Google Trek created by Shane Butler, who happens to be an English teacher here at Shadow Ridge High School. And Shane put this together a couple years ago. And so when we open this trek up, and Mark and Carl jump in if something doesn't look right on the screen, because of course it looks great to me here.
It's coming through just fine.
Perfect. So what we look at is we open up this Google Map, and it opens up to the entire world, and we see a bunch of push pins and icons and different things like that on the map. Over on the left-hand side, we get the actual title of the map, and then there's a description. And if I click on the description, it will open up a little bit more. So Shane has let us know that this Google Trek is designed for students and teachers to get some background information about the Titanic. It's also an interactive timeline, so he's put it in chronological order. And he's done this for middle school or high school English students, but he lets you know that it could be adapted for all different grade levels and subjects. So the description is really key when you create your trek in letting people know what it's all about. As I scroll down, I actually start what the trek, the guidance of the Google Trek here. And it's kind of common, and or maybe you'd even say a requirement by Dr. Christie, that we start out with some sort of teacher information to let teachers know what this should look like. Okay, and so you see Shane here's got some information about what the trek is. He's got some links to particular activities or history links, and he also makes reference to the Common Core state standards there as well. Let's see, I didn't mess that up at all, did I, Mark?
I think you're okay still.
Okay, perfect.
It looks like you're out in the middle of the ocean, though.
Yeah, I am out in the middle of the ocean. Are you able to see the teacher information on the left, though?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. So Mark makes a good point, is this particular piece of information is tied to this push pin that happens to be out here in the middle of the ocean. And so sometimes these informational pieces that we build into the trek have no geographical relevance at all. And so this one Shane's just kind of put out there in the ocean somewhere. A lot of times teachers put that particular push pin right back at their school to identify, where they're from or where this, idea came from. And so sometimes you'll find some of those that the information on the left sidebar is more important than where that push pin's at. So I click the back arrow up at the top. Now Shane has another push pin here that leads us to Common Core state standards, which looks like goes out to the middle of the ocean somewhere. And so he's tied these to all of the Common Core state standards, this is a little bit before the Nevada Academic Content Standards. But you'd list your standards there, and that's important for teachers all across the country to know what standards are affiliated with this particular lesson. And then our trek kind of begins, and Shane's titled this Welcome Students, Start Here. And we click on that, we get some information about this trek. Shane actually has created a worksheet. So this is kind of our first interactive piece to this. He's added a link to the worksheet here, and if I click on that, notice that the student now has a worksheet to work through, whether they save that into their own Drive account or the teacher requires them to print that and work through the Trek with this worksheet. The resource has been created by Shane for the activity. You'll find that a lot of these Google Treks have resources like that, and maybe some have assessment components that are built into the Trek as you move along, which you kind of see here as well. Shane talks about having some focus questions, that he wants, or some objectives as you go through this, which is, what was the Titanic, what's the history, and what are some of the major recorded events. Okay, this did start with to a particular push pin, which as we zoom into, it looks like Shane has tied this to Shadow Ridge High School. So Shane's a teacher here at Shadow Ridge, so it makes sense that his first push pin there says here, welcome students from Shadow Ridge. As I move on to the next one, it starts to give us some information. And so this is where I'll kind of step back for a minute and kind of give you the idea behind these Google Treks. Is there's always some piece of information. There's always some sort of image. So there's some images down here. If I click on those images, they'll come up onto the screen. Shane actually has 2 of them listed here. And there's some information about this particular shipyard. It looks like that the Titanic was built, as I've lost the Trek there and closed the wrong window. And so students start to do this research.
Jared, let me interrupt you real fast.
Sure.
Jared, for those of you who are watching, if you're having a hard time seeing it, if you hover your mouse over the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you'll be able to use a magnifying glass to zoom out or zoom in, and that will allow you to get a better picture of what he's showing us.
So what we've got here is Shane starts to introduce the building of the Titanic, and students have the option to start to answer some of these questions. Maybe there's a particular link, like Shane's included here, the answer to his particular question, and so this becomes interactive for the students. They're able to zoom into the map, they're able to turn on the satellite imagery, they're able to go out to those links, and it starts to become a little bit more self-paced while the student starts to learn about the material. And this goes on. I think Shane's got several stops for us here that you can see that walks you through all the pieces of information that he's asking students to gather. He's got some fun facts at the end, I believe, and then he's got an entire resources page, which is kind of an important piece to this in making sure that you're citing the sources that you're putting into your particular Trek, images and videos and things like that. Okay, so here's one. I want to show you just a couple of examples, and I don't want to take too long because I want to kind of get you in to see how these are built. A Day in the Life of Mrs. Galloway was created by Jamie Galloway, who is another teacher in the Clark County School District. Jamie actually is an elementary teacher, so this is actually built for 3rd grade, and this is a particular math lesson. Jamie was attempting to teach her kids about passage of time and some things like that, and so she actually built a lesson that builds questions into each of the students' stops. So again, you see that there's a standards link there for the students. There was an introduction, but Jamie's Trek starts off a little different than Shane's. Jamie says that Mrs. Galloway woke up at 7 o'clock, and in 2 hours and 30 minutes she's going to the gym. The first assessment question she has is, what time will it be when she gets to the gym? And so she has students write this down in either a journal or there's a worksheet. Jamie was pretty bold even. She even put an image of the front of her house on there, and I think she's even got some pictures, I think, of the gym that she goes to built in there as well. And so she kind of walked kids through her real life. She talks about her family in this and going to her son's soccer game, but all throughout this entire trek, you'll find that she asks a lot of really important math questions to her students who are moving through this. Now, the way that Jamie presented hers at her particular school was not like a high school setting like Shane where all the students had computers, but she presented this to the class as a whole. So using her LCD projector, she presented in the class, wrote their answers down, and they discussed their answers in groups and those types of things as they went through this particular trek. Are there any questions? Because I'm not looking, Mark, out there at that I need to answer at all?
Nope, you're looking good. No questions right now.
Okay, fantastic. And then let me give you a third one, and the third one that I have out here comes from kind of a non-conventional teacher. This was done by a secondary art teacher, Cynthia Wolfsberg. This was actually the very first Google Trek that we had published out of Clark County teachers that I'd worked with. But Cynthia's an art teacher, and so sometimes those non-core teachers have a harder time finding ways to put things together. And so what Cynthia's done is she actually has done an Egyptian art topic or unit in her class, and so she was able to take and put that artwork or a background of the artwork into a Google Trek. And so she actually walks her students through, and she still uses this to this day, about Luxor, Egypt. And the trek actually starts right here at home in at the Luxor in downtown, which I learned a lot from this Google Trek as well, because I didn't realize that Luxor was an actual city in Egypt. But she makes the connections for the students that here we are, and here's the Luxor Hotel Casino, but here is Luxor, Egypt, where she takes the students to, and she's got some information there from Wikipedia. She asks some questions of the students. They actually have an interactive passport that I believe is at the end of this trek, where they have to fill out that passport with these pieces of information. What Cynthia has done really well in her trek is she's incorporated a variety of Web 2.0 tools, which is kind of a necessity in building a really good trek. So if you can see this, she actually has a site here where the students are able to look at a virtual mummy and tear apart a mummy casing and what's behind the wrappings and why did they do that, and it's got some music to it, and kids are able to kind of move through that and discover some of the pieces of the mummy. She's got some music built into the trek and some things like that. And so that's kind of an essential part of making that trek really exciting for kids and a little bit more interactive. So there's three very distinct treks at some different levels, some core areas and some not, to give you kind of an idea of how this works. Now, I'm going to show you kind of how this is done, and I'm going to give you just kind of a brief overview of how we create these Google Treks. It's actually quite simple. I believe that Mark's included in the materials there the tutorial for this, and it's also on Dr. Christie's website, but I wrote a tutorial that talks you step by step on how to build one of these Google Treks and gives you all the screenshots and things that you need. So that's included with this presentation as well. But here's kind of what it looks like. This can be done in a couple different ways. One, you can start at Google Maps and create a new map. Or two, we can go in from Google Drive and do this. And so let me kind of show you both. It's super simple. So number one, if we get out to Google Maps, there are three little bars that are common for Google, called the hot dogs, is what I call them. And so if I click on those hot dogs, after I'm logged into my account, of course, we have some different views, but then you see in the second section there it says My Maps. So we're always kind of looking for this My Maps section. And if I click on My Maps, then it allows me to create a new map or even look at some of the older maps that I've done. So this is kind of a list of some of the maps I've been working on currently. And down at the bottom of that little navigation bar, it says Create a Map. And if I click on Create a Map, it's going to put me into this building or edit mode of Google Maps. Okay, so that's one way. Let me show you a second way before I start manipulating the map. The second way is to just go right into your Google Drive account, and under that big red New button where we find Docs and Sheets and Slides, down at the bottom we'll see More, and you'll see on here Google My Maps. Okay, so it goes to Forms and Drawings, and then you'll see My Maps listed there. And so just by clicking on My Maps, it will take us right to the exact same editable map location. And so this is kind of how this works. We start by giving it a title. So just like working with your docs or slides or anything else, we click on a title and we give it a title. And I think this is about my 24th map today, so I'll name it a little bit different. And you give it this great description. And whatever description you happen to give that, you can always go back and make changes to this. So if I happen to say save here, and I decide now that I'm going to add to that description, or there's some objectives I want to put there, all we have to do is go right back and click on that, and it opens that title and description window again. Okay, and remember that Google is this great auto-save feature, so things are saving back into your Google Drive for you. So if you happen to lose the power, or the internet goes out, or something like that, it's saved for you live. The second component to this is this whole layering section, and this came in a couple years ago with the new version of Google Maps. It doesn't necessarily fit for doing Google Treks, but I found it to be a great way to section out your trek in different ways. So a lot of teachers do one particular layer. You might find some other Google Treks out there that actually use different layers because they've broken it up into different modules or different days that they're going through it, or even different concepts with the same kind of idea. And so you're able to title the layer. So if we click on that, you know, I'm going to just put layer 1, but maybe this had to do with you know, solving equations or whatever this is. We're able to import from a spreadsheet if you had some particular coordinates and things like that. And for a trek, that doesn't necessarily come into play, but you could import stuff from a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet. And so how this starts is we actually look for a location on the map, but we do that in two ways. One, in that great Google search bar, we type in a location, or two, we just find the location on the map. Okay, and so I see Las Vegas here, and I zoom into Las Vegas, and I won't be very specific, but I say, you know, this is the spot that I want to start. I'm going to get up here towards Shadow Ridge High School, somewhere up in this area. Okay, you'll notice that I have some buttons up top that allow me to work with this trek. And so I've got the undo and the redo, and I've got select items, but one of them is a little add marker button, and that's the key component to the Google Trek, is those push pins. And I click on add marker, and you'll notice that my cursor is now turned to this plus sign, or these crosshairs. And I'm able to click, and it drops that marker onto the map. And I'm able to title the marker, and I'm going to leave mine point 1. And I'm able to add in any kind of information. And so this is where you would add that information about your stop. It's where you can copy and paste the links and do some of those things that add to the description, or the questioning that you have that goes with this particular stop. I'll just type in some add information here. It's important to know that inside this particular text box, that if you want to enter down, and this sometimes isn't very clear to people, that when we're inside this box, it's almost like an Excel spreadsheet box or a Google Sheet box. If you use Alt and Enter, that will move you down a line. If you just hit Enter on your keyboard, it saves it automatically. So Alt and Enter is kind of that trick. Notice that there's a little camera icon, and when I hover over that, it says that I can add images or video. And so by clicking on that, I have the option to search immediately for Google Images. And so I'm going to go ahead and search for Shadow Ridge High School. And the great thing about this Google image search, and I don't know how well you can see this at the bottom of the search, but Google automatically is looking for images that are copyright free, that are available for you to use and share. And so that's what they do when they search from this particular area. Is these are images that you're able to use. So I'm going to go ahead and use, this looks like the front of Shadow Ridge High School. When I select that, you'll see that image pops in there. And notice that there's a little plus sign at the bottom corner of that, or there's a trash can. So the little plus sign allows me to add more images, okay? And the trash can allows me to delete that image altogether. So if I say save, there's the first stop on my Google Trek. And you'll notice over here under layer 1 that it says there's point number 1. And we would just continue adding different points and stops in this by clicking on the marker and dropping those markers wherever we needed to drop them. Now, you can reorder the markers by just grabbing and dragging, so any order that you want to put them in. And you can even change their little icons. So maybe I don't like those little red markers that I see there, notice that as I hover over point 1, there's a little paint can to the right. By clicking on that, I have different colors, I have different icons, and it even says more icons where I can choose from a huge list or even add in a URL of a particular image that I found on the web. Okay, and so it'll put those in as the icon. So that's how we change those. And so basically we continue to build this Google Trek by adding in links to those markers, adding in Web 2.0 tools, and in some way incorporating a assessment component, whether it's throughout the Trek or with a worksheet or a quiz at the end, or however you'd like to do that. The only other piece here is this base map, and that is what is your map going to look like, and that's whether or not we turn on satellite imagery or we turn on roads, or whatever type of base map that you're looking for. And we continue to build this over time, and when you're all ready to share your map and put it out there for students to see, we have this great share button that we've seen with Google all the time, and that is by changing the privacy. By default, everything in Google is private, by changing who can access that. And one of the important things that I would let you know is if you ever decide to create one of these Google Treks and you'd like to have it published, by all means share it with me and I'll help you get it published on Dr. Christie's site. But the important thing is that when we change that we provide the link that anybody can view, not just the link where Clark County School District logins can view. If you choose to do that, because then only your kids can log in and see it, that's fine. But if you would like to get this published and used in other places, you have to make sure that you use the link that is open and available to all. It doesn't need to be public on the web. We just need to be able to use it for anyone who has the link. And then we'll get this nice, really long link that we're able to use and share with our students or our schools or anywhere. Okay. So you kind of have an idea of how to build one of these Treks. I want to show you the Google Trek site at googletreks.org, and this is in the tutorial as well. Dr. Christie does a really good job at featuring Treks and giving you a great opportunity to learn what they're about. She has some fantastic resources that are here. In fact, the tutorials that are listed there are the tutorials that I have built for creating Treks. There's some great YouTube videos of Dr. Christie and I kind of talking about Treks, what people are saying. In fact, there's some fantastic people like Kent Tibbetts and Kirsten Taylor, who are CCSD teachers that are listed on Dr. Christie's site, and lots of images and things where she's talking about Google Treks. So lots of information. She's got a tutorial there from the old version of Google Maps, but then she breaks down Google Treks into categories by subject area and by grade level. And so if you click on some of these, if I happen to be a mathematics teacher and I'm looking for a particular Google Trek or even ideas about Treks, you'll find them. There's Jamie Galloway's that I talked about. It's a general math topic, or Mathematics Journey by Kristen Cohorst, who is another CCSD teacher, and all of those teachers are labeled with the SNRPDP. They happen to build these in a class, so you'll know that they're from CCSD. And you'll see that we have lots around there from this particular area and in a lot of different varieties. So it's interesting. I don't know, maybe you're a math teacher and you're wondering how do you put calculus on a Google map. Well, Andrew Summers here has done it and able to put some things about product and quotient rules. So anything that you're really looking for, it's not just about social studies teachers, it's about all different areas. And so there's some great Treks here for science and some fantastic stuff for elementary teachers. Cinderella Stories Around the World is fantastic. You're able to kind of take your kids through a journey on a map, talking about things that maybe are not even related to geography at all. So it's interesting to see. Dr. Christie also has a rubric on here. And so if you're interested in creating a Trek that you want published on her site, she's got a rubric here that kind of guides you through what you need to have in that Google Trek in order to be published on her site. She also is an advocate of students creating Treks. And so actually I was just having this conversation with a student leaders club that I run here at Shadow Ridge today. They're actually starting to build Treks because over the years Dr. Christie has only had 6 students create Treks for her site. And so I think it's a great opportunity for students to demonstrate their knowledge in a completely different way. And I know that a lot of the students that I work with can grasp this concept a lot quicker than sometimes the adults. And so having students create treks, they've got their own rubric that they need to follow to be published, but Dr. Christie will gladly publish their trek up there as well. So if you have a class of students that you'd like to work on or give them a great project over the next couple of months, a Google Trek might be a thing that kind of fits their learning style, and maybe something that they create for you, and they can get their name up on a website. So, questions about Google Treks? And again, Mark, I'm not looking at that, so if you'll just kind of feed me.
Nope, you're looking good right now. I think
Cool.
everyone's just watching.
Completely overwhelmed, so it's kind of how it works. Let me take you into another kind of down these same lines. And I've been a Google Treks fan for a long time, but I think that I'd be lying if I didn't say that there was things that are now maybe even better suited or even a little bit more user-friendly to use that can do the same kind of digital storytelling or even lesson planning. And so one of those tools that's been out not too terribly long is called Google Tour Builder. It's kind of one of those hidden Google tools that a lot of people don't know about. It was originally created for members of the military to be able to share their travels with their family and friends. That's how Google kind of created this tool. It was a 20% time application created by a Google employee. It's kind of the mesh between the downloadable Google Earth and Google Maps, and we get this 3D look. It does require a Google Earth plugin that you have to make sure that you've got installed on your browser. These Google Tours can be public or private as well, and they're made to create stories. The great thing and the biggest difference between Tour Builders, you get this great three-dimensional look of things that you don't get in Google Maps. You're actually able to set the zoom level, so when somebody clicks on a particular marker or push pin, it actually zooms them in to street view or a 3D view or something like that. It does have some rich text editing, meaning you can kind of bold and underline and put links in that you can't do in the Google Maps. You're even able to track your paths if you choose, and you're able to add video and images, and up to 25 of those per stop. And so it's kind of a different take, a more modern look of this kind of digital storytelling. And so I'll show you just maybe one built by CCSD people here, Animals and Habitats. This was done by Ginny Anderson, one of my RPDP students at one time. And see, it looks a little bit similar, but maybe a little bit different here. And so we've got this introduction, and Ginny's got some images that we're able to blow up if we choose to, and there's a little next button down below. And now Ginny's added 12 different images into this particular stop that we're able to look at. So we're looking at Arctic habitat and the animals that are there. And she might even have a video in there. But there's our information. Notice there's links to definitions. And Ginny's even got an animal memory game built into this. And so her assessment goes through this tour, built into each of the stops. So she has some discussion question and activities built in there. And then, of course, her vocabulary and Nevada Academic Content Standards. And so as I move on to the next piece, there's the desert habitat. And we've got 8 images there. And notice how the zooming in starts to happen. So Ginny set how she wanted it to zoom, but there's nothing stopping a student from going even further. In fact, notice that we have a zoom scroll wheel over here on the left, and we also have a Pegman, which means that if available, Street View is available in this particular tour. So students are able to grab Pegman and drop him out wherever they can get a Street View, and so they actually get to look around a little bit more. This is a little bit easier to work with and build, and it seems a little bit more user-friendly for the digital storytelling idea. So kind of a modern take on Google Treks in a way, using Google Tour Builder. So I wanted to let you know that might be even a better tool for your students to use, or maybe even yourself. with that, I think Carl is up to chat a little bit about Google Lit Trips.
All right, so I volunteered to add in a little bit here about Google Lit Trips. Jerome Berg developed Google Lit Trips quite a few years ago. It's basically the same thing as Trex, but it's centered around literature, where you basically create a journey or a trek or a trip using Google Maps. Google Lit Trips you build them the same way you would. You could build them either using the Google Tour or the same format as Google Trex, but it's about a book, so that you take a book that you're studying, and kids could make a map and put in information about the book on the map, so that the literature that they're reading comes to life. There isn't much more, because it's a lot of the same stuff that you would do in Trex, just centered around literature now is a different way to use them.
Carl, why don't I take a second and try to do an app share and show them a Google Lit Trip real fast. This was one of my favorite Lit Trips to do with my students. I taught high school English over at Shadow Ridge with Jared, and one of my favorite novels to teach, or I shouldn't say novel, texts to teach was Night by Elie Wiesel, and it's his memoirs of life in the Holocaust. And so for Google Lit Trips, you actually have to use the Google Earth program. You have to have that installed on your computer. So I'm just watching it. I'm hoping that it's not too clunky coming through the app share. This was a Lit Trip that was developed for the Wiesel's memoir Night, and we start off with a map of Germany in 1941. That's done as an overlay over a map of Europe today. And so you can see that I can actually take that overlay and tone it down so you can just see modern day Europe, and bring it back up so that the way students can see the scope of Germany's power just in that year, in 1941. And obviously, they took over a lot more territory as the war progressed. And then we start out with the narrator's, the main character, the writer's story. And we get to see a little bit more about him. It takes us into some textual evidence, gives us a picture of him that you can look at. And I can go down into Wiesel's hometown of Szeged in Transylvania. And it's getting a little bit clunky here, trying to go through the app share. But this Lit Trip basically goes through the entire story of Wiesel's experience in World War II and in the Holocaust. And it's really useful for students. The students didn't appreciate, I'm scrolling back out here, didn't appreciate the scope of his journey until I walked them through this Lit Trip, and I talked to them, and I'd take them from destination to destination as he was brought into Poland, into the concentration camps. And I would show them how he had to, as he participated in the Death March, how many miles he marched and where he marched to, and I'd scroll through it, and I would just, let me actually do that little bit here, zoom in. And I would zoom in really close and take them through, and they would watch as he would go through town upon town upon town, and it made the situation, made the story, the historical experience much more real to them. And I tell them this was how many miles he marched, and they could actually see it. And every student in the class, every time I've done this, has 100% attention. They're all focused on it, and they're extremely engaged and learning and getting that background information to the story that makes it a little bit more understandable. And so these Google Lit Trips are a phenomenal thing. Let me switch to the website so you can see the Lit Trip website real fast. This is the Lit Trips website, and you can see that there are resources for K through 5, the young readers, elementary teachers. You might recognize some of these stories. I'm there just waiting for the the app share to catch up with me. All right, the app share isn't catching up with me at all. You're still stuck on my last page. Okay, so we have the K through 5. You're stuck on my last page, so I'm just going to talk through it. We have resources for 6th through 8th, for the middle school years, and the high school years. And I don't know why it's not catching up. Let me try. Okay. You can see the high school lit trips there. And so any of the novels or text that you might be reading, please look it through the Google Lit Trips. Some of them that they'll have, some they won't have. So these are not something that I would say recommend trying to create. Fairly intense creation of these, but use these resources, download the files, and when you have Google Earth open, you download that file, it'll automatically go into your Google Earth, and you can just take your kids on that lit trip right then, and really make the literature come alive for them. So yes, it's a virtual field trip. Any questions about the lit trips at all? Dennis makes a good comment. He says, just so you know, you can import Google Lit Trips into My Maps. If you download the KML file for the Lit Trip, that lets you use them on a Chromebook where you don't have access to the Google Earth program. So good point, Dennis. I haven't even tried that. All right, so that's Lit Trips for you. I think Carl wants to say a little bit more about some virtual field trips.
Here I am. Okay, all I did was I added some other things, some tools that are out there and available. Street View is available both on your desktops and on most of your apps and your phones and stuff. On Street View on tablets and your iPads and Android tablets are really cool because you get a 360 view of locations and stuff. Cardboard is a Google tool that they've got that works with smartphones or I guess iPod touches that allow you to look at those Street View map pictures, those 360s, with a stereoscopic kind of thing, so that you put the headset on, the Google Cardboard headset on, and you can look at 360-degree pictures. It's kind of fun. Google is right now doing expeditions where they'll come to your school and bring a set of this stuff to you, and they have an app that controls the Cardboard app from a tablet so that all the students are the same place at the same time. I keep looking forward to Google putting that app out for teachers to use on their own, because right now they're very limited in the locations that they're going with their Google expeditions. But you can take your kids with iPads or Android tablets, put the Street View on, or use Street View on your desktop to start doing some 360-degree views of various places and stuff. Take them inside the Louvre or inside various museums to look around and show them what those areas actually look like. It's really kind of fun to do and helps get the kids a much better sense of the world around them.
All righty. Well, I'd like to thank Jared and Carl, and it looks like I was going to ask Kathy if she had anything to add, but she had to take off. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Carl, for your expertise and your information. We really, really do appreciate it. If you have questions, please stick around. If you don't mind, please take this little survey for today's webinar and submit it so that we can get some feedback. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll take some questions.